welcome everyone, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to come today and share with you this theme of working together. It's been a bit of a theme of quite a bit of work that I've been doing lately in various different things, and I think it's really important. Today I'm talking about the HerveyBay Community Alliance, as Bruce mentioned, and I've called it Alliance Not Reliance because we'd like to think that this is a slightly different way of thinking about working together. And a short reflection on some of the lessons that we've learned in the journey that's brought us to the point where we are now. Just a new group, but we've got some great plans for the future. Actually, as Bruce mentioned, I've been here since the late 80s. I've actually worked in the community sector for about 35 years. And in that time, one of the things I have learned is patience and persistence. And Adam mentioned the community centre just over the road. If on your way here you might have driven past that, it's probably one of the nicest buildings in Hervey Bay. But I can attest to the fact that, well over 10 years of working to see that come to reality. And I think a real persistence from a lot of people who are partners in that vision. And persistence in the fact that something that's for the most disadvantaged in our community and for the people who work with them, they actually do deserve a space like that. And people who come into that centre now reflect on that and say, this is such a wonderful centre for us. So this is about how we value everybody in the community. Okay, so today you're going to hear, and you have heard from Brian, some very inspiring stories about grassroots, and you'll hear some themes in my talk that's very similar to some of the things that Brian mentioned. It's great to hear about things that can come from the community that are really ground up things that aren't reliant on government and come out of the people and rely on volunteers and local investment. And that is great. But we do also have to be realistic and understand that the level of disadvantage and even just the delivery of day-to-day community services that you and I use, libraries, childcare, education, we really realistically can't deliver all of those things without some reliance on government funding, quite a large reliance on government funding. And unfortunately one of the downsides of that is that as a community services sector, we often become reliant. We become reliant for them to lead. And I guess the alliance is something that is a reflection, it's a bit about a cultural shift of the sector perhaps reaching some level of maturity, as well as a bit of frustration about the fact that doing the same old things isn't working. And so it's maybe time for us to step up to the plate, get our act together and be part of the solution. Okay, so make no mistake, this is not the same old, same old. This is not just a network. We're not just getting together to exchange information and have a talk fest, as we had made that reference before. We really want to be doing something proactive, and one of the differences, of course, is that it is purely for the sector and we don't have government driving it. Just to take a quick step back, the actual impetus for the Alliance started well over 12 months ago. There were a couple of forums held in Beckenham with over 60 people there from the not-for-profit sector. And we were talking about regional issues and different ways of working together. There was a strong feeling towards having a group like this. And as I say, some of that comes from the frustration of seeing things not working so far, feeling sometimes that we get left behind and that we're not part of making, an equal party in making decisions, and seeing some decisions made for our regions that really we feel doesn't work terribly well for us. We want to be part of the game. We want to go toe-to-toe with government. But in order to do that, we have to get our own act together. We have to learn how to play the game. When I say toe-to-toe to government, I don't mean on opposing teams, but we still like to get down and dirty and be in the ruck. and not be sitting on the sidelines watching as a spectator. Okay, so this is a great idea. We want to have something, we want to be independent, we want to be able to set our own agenda. So what's this all about? But who's going to make it happen? You've all sat through sessions like today, you've all facilitated meetings where everybody espouses some great values, some great ideas, and we all know at the end of the day that we'll walk out the door and resume our lives as if nothing happened, and nothing will happen. So if that sounds familiar, I can see a few nods. Okay, so in this case we didn't really want that to happen. We thought it was a great idea, but no one's responsible specifically in the sector for taking these things forward. A few of us really wanted to try to give it a chance to have a go. So I've made some reference up there about starting with the lone nut dancer. Now, if you're not familiar with this concept, I'd suggest you go on Google and have a look, Google lone dancer, and have a look at the video there, which is a highly entertaining video of a scenario that it will be quite familiar to many of us. And a commentary on that about leadership and the formation of movements. What the video shows is a young shirtless man, no doubt under the influence of some illicit substance, who stands up at a music festival and starts to dance. And the process that follows, whereby everybody else starts to get up and do the same thing until everybody's up dancing lest they be left out. And this is the process of leadership, and it's quite entertaining. But have a look at that. The lesson from us, for us as a group, was that we can start with a small group. One of the things that we often do when we have a great idea is we put out an invite to everybody. We want to fill the room. And when we get there, we assume that everybody's there for the same purpose, that everybody's on about the same thing. And we all go home, we have the next meeting, the faces have changed a bit. So we revisit what we did last time. We don't make a lot of progress. People say all the right things in the room, but when they go out the door, there's a bit of grumbling and mumbling going on, and maybe I'm not going to come next time. You know. So, does it sound familiar? This is the sort of thing. So, it's okay to start with a small group, we felt, but it's really important that we know what we're on about. So, we asked for people to stand up and be part of an initial working group just to set the rules and do some of the groundwork. This is something we often don't do. So having done that, we sort of took the attitude, if people didn't put their hands up, we'd just call it good and go home. We didn't want to flog a dead horse. So having formed our group, one of our first tasks was to embrace our elephants. So this, again, is something that we often don't do. We need to ask our elephants and recognise the elephants in the room. We need to ask them to stand up. We need to give them a good check them out. And then we need to embrace our elephants. And if you're wondering you would all be familiar with the term elephants in the room. Now, this will vary depending on who is involved in a group. But in the case of the community sector, the sort of examples would be things like competition between agencies. You know, our funding systems do create an environment where we do actually have to compete with each other. So I guess what we're saying about things like this is that they are not necessarily good or bad things, but they are real things that are there. But the elephants are often the things that stop people from acting once they walk out the door, because these are the realities of life. Things like professional differences, if you've got people with different professional frameworks that they work with, such as, say, clinical as opposed to community development, come from very different spaces, and we need to respect that, but we also need to recognise that it means that people aren't necessarily seeing and hearing things the same way. And it gets in the way sometimes of people working together. The obvious realities of lack of time and competing priorities, the fact that people are paid by the organisations that they work for, and that will create some competing agendas. And also the local agendas, and that people from different areas have different needs and want to push those issues, and that's fine. So these are some of the elephants. So then we have to set down some rules to manage our elephants. And in the case of just a few observations about elephants. Elephants are very large, and they take up a lot of room, so they may not leave a lot of room in the room for anything else. So that's one observation. The other one is that some elephants definitely need to be left at the door. Some elephants can come in, but they need to be kept on a pretty short leash and make sure they behave themselves. Some elephants need to be patted, and they need people to be nice to them and truly try to understand what it is to be an elephant. And finally, we also need to recognise that elephants can do a lot of heavy lifting for us. So sometimes we can use our elephants to our advantage. In the case of the Alliance, and I might say lots of very robust discussion led to these things. The list looks like a pretty, that's the usual kind of list. But in terms of our elephants, the first one, the priority is to the people and the communities we serve. And there are little riders that go behind this, but each of these ones to explain what they mean. But that's a pretty big elephant for us, because really it's about putting your personal interests, putting your local or organisational interests aside, not aside, but putting the interest of the overall community first. And it's not as easy as it sounds. We often pay homage to that, but we don't actually do it. Another big elephant for us in this community sector is the difference in sizes of organisations and sensitivity about that. That small organisations often feel sort of swallowed up by the bigger players. So we have to have something there about equality that's actually saying everyone's got an equal voice. Diversity, that's the bit about patting down the elephant and understanding it. And that's something that we as an alliance will have to take time to do yet. You know, we're still working down that road. We want to be positive and creative and solution focused. The collaboration, again, it's not just a value, it's a value that we expect people to sign up to. And if you're not prepared to play these games, then we don't really, maybe not part of the group. And the other one is positive representation. So that's about not going out the door and having a grumble. If you've got a problem, tell us why you're in the room. So our next job, and these things aren't really linear, they're circular, but our next job really was about determining what we're really here for. For most of us, people aren't going to come unless they really feel there's something in it for them. We need to be clear about what we're there for. And for most of us, it's not about soaking up the scenery. In the case of the Alliance, this was our eventual purpose statement that we came up with. But we really focused on, it's fairly, again, probably sounds a bit generic, but it's really about collective action, it's about alliance, and it's about that positive view that we really want to create some new and different solutions and different ways of working with others rather than it being a negative process. Much like Brian said, it's about looking at the assets that we have and how we can better use them. So, standing on our own feet. If we truly want to be a group from the sector that can set its own agenda and set its own rules and do the things that it really feels passionate about, then we have to be independent. And how do we go about being independent? For us, it's about being real. So, and again, I guess the starting small and understanding that these things we'll go through a process. It's about being real, understanding that we have small beginnings. We set ourselves a really modest budget, which was really just the bare bones of a bit of admin support for the first 12 months, and a realistic budget that we might be able to scrape together. We embrace the fact that our membership will start with those who really want to be there, and it might be a small group, it might be a bigger group. But that's part of the process, and we need to show leadership. So those of us who want to kick this off, we've got to take a few risks. we've got to put ourselves out there, and we've got to be prepared to make that commitment and show a bit of leadership to other people in the sector to follow with us. So then we had to be a little bit fearless and ask people to put their money where their mouth was. So again, it's about, I guess, something a little bit different in the sector about not apologising about asking people to make a commitment, to set the rules, to be a bit rigid and tough and ask people to actually put their money there. We've got about 8 or 10 organisations already, which we feel a little cocky about, and 10 or so organisations that have actually made a clear commitment and signed a commitment to those rules, those purposes and the values. All of them have committed some membership money, and all of them, and many of them have actually offered some extra investment for that first year. We're well on our way to meeting our costs. So what that means for us is that while as organisations we're not independent of government, as a group we can act reasonably independently and follow our own agendas. We've had a launch late last month and our first meeting just yesterday. And the road ahead for us, I guess a lot to be shaped yet, but we've identified about 6 priorities at the launch, and yesterday we decided that time-wise and timeliness-wise and so on, our most important thing at the moment is about the broader impacts of funding cuts in the region, particularly to the community sector. We've heard quite a lot in the press about funding to government positions, and that's a concern for us as well. But I think you've probably not heard much about the services that we've lost in the community sector, and it's going to have quite a big impact. So part of our role is to gather some of that information, get a bit more of a picture, and then we really want to build some relationships with other decision makers like the Regional Planning Committee that does the regional plan, industry groups, chambers of commerce and so on, and start a dialogue about how we can best take our region forward and start to turn around our status as the most disadvantaged region in Queensland. It's not really an award we want. So, come, let's dance.